In a forbidden forest, a single carving on a leaf could save a dying world. Elara, a young botanist, holds that fragile clue in her hand. She knows the village elders have forbidden anyone from entering the green abyss. They speak of a wrathful forest and certain doom, but Elara sees past their superstition. She sees a desperate hope for her drought-stricken homeland. An ancient civilization once thrived there, living in perfect harmony with the trees through a lost, symbiotic technology. By the end of her journey, you will witness the incredible moment this forgotten power is reborn. What secrets lie hidden beneath the whispering canopy, and what price must be paid to awaken them? What would you risk to uncover a truth that could save everything you love? The forest floor vanished into a profound darkness far below, but the canopy above was a different kind of maze. It was a world that swallowed light, where the sun's rays were strangled by a lattice of interwoven branches. Elara's only guide was the soft, ethereal glow of fungi clinging to the ancient bark. She moved with a deliberate slowness, her botanist's eye deciphering the patterns in the luminescent growths. A cluster of blue-green mushrooms indicated a sturdy, reliable branch, while a smattering of sickly yellow warned of brittle, rotten wood that could give way at any moment. It was a living, breathing map written in light, and she was its sole reader. Every step was a calculated risk, a silent negotiation with the forest itself. Yet, with each careful placement of her feet, she became acutely aware that she was not the only one reading the signs. A subtle shift in the shadows, a rustle that was too precise to be the wind, a feeling of eyes pressing against her from the gloom. These were the only indications of the watchers. They moved in absolute silence, their presence a cold weight on the back of her neck. Her scientific mind screamed to stop, to document, to understand these arboreal sentinels. But a deeper, primal instinct screamed louder, a raw fear of the unknown that tightened her chest and made her hands tremble. The silence of the green abyss was not peaceful, it was predatory. It was in that crushing quiet that her training became her anchor. She checked the delicate instruments strapped to her wrist, their readings a testament to a world in perfect, if terrifying, balance. The data was a lifeline of logic in a sea of instinctual dread. To turn back now would be to surrender to superstition, to let fear dictate the fate of her people. She took a slow, steadying breath and committed to the descent, moving deeper into the heart of the unknown. It was then that a new sound began to permeate the oppressive silence, a low, melodic hum that seemed to vibrate up through the very tree she clung to. The sound was neither natural nor mechanical, a resonance that felt both ancient and alive. It grew steadily louder, a siren's call from the depths, pulling her downward with an almost physical force. Through the thick, swirling mists below, the outline of something immense began to take shape, a structure so choked with vines and moss, it seemed a part of the forest itself. The colossal structure resolved from the mist, a fusion of ancient nature and impossible craft. It was a petrified tree trunk of unimaginable girth, its core seamlessly interwoven with polished, dark stone. The surface was a living tapestry of intricate glyphs that pulsed with a soft, internal light, ebbing and flowing like a slow, sleeping breath. Driven by a mixture of scientific awe and desperation, Elara carefully mixed a specialized solvent from her kit. She applied it to a small section, watching as centuries of grime and moss dissolved away. Beneath the filth, she found not more bark, but a perfectly hidden seam, a hairline crack defining a shape within the trunk. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she reached out, her fingers hovering over the glowing symbols. With a final, steadying breath, she pressed her palm against the central glyph. The effect was instantaneous and terrifying. The carved lines flared with a blinding white light, and a deep thrum passed through the ground. A circular section of the trunk ear-eyed open with a whisper of moving stone, revealing a smooth, downward-sloping ramp that disappeared into profound darkness. But the price of this activation was a wave of absolute blackness that swept out from the gate. All around her, the glowing fungi, her only guides, winked out in a synchronized wave, plunging the canopy into an oppressive, lightless void. For a long moment, she stood paralyzed, her claustrophobia screaming at the thought of that dark, confined space. This was a sacred place, a tomb of secrets, and she was an intruder. But the memory of her parched village, of the cracked earth and desperate faces, pushed her forward. She had come too far to turn back now. Tearing a strip of phosphorescent moss from a nearby branch, she entered the gateway, carefully placing glowing tufts at intervals to mark her path back to the world. She had taken only a dozen steps when a deep, grinding sound echoed from behind. She spun around just in time to see the stone door slide shut, sealing her in with a final, echoing thud. The outside world, with its air and light, was gone. In the absolute, suffocating darkness that followed, something soft and root-like brushed against her bare arm. It felt not like a random vine, but curiously intentional, a deliberate, probing touch in the void. The touch was impossibly gentle, a cool, smooth tendril of light wrapping around her wrist. Elara flinched, her heart seizing, expecting a trap, a constriction, a snap of bone, but the root simply held her, its soft bioluminescence pulsing in a slow, calming rhythm. It was not a shackle, but an invitation. Every instinct screamed to rip her arm away, to flee from this unnatural contact. Yet the root remained placid, its light a steady beacon in the overwhelming dark. She had a choice: trust the superstition of her village or trust the evidence before her. This was not a mindless plant, it was a system. Taking a shuddering breath, she surrendered to its guidance, allowing the gentle pressure to pull her forward. The moment she took a step, the purpose became clear. Her foot came down where the root guided, and a hair's breadth to her left. A section of the floor gave way with a faint whisper of shifting stone, revealing a black void below. The root was leading her along a safe path, deactivating dormant defenses she never would have seen. It was a symbiotic guide, and she was its guest. The fear did not vanish, but it was joined by a burning curiosity. How did it communicate? Could she communicate back? Tentatively, she curled her fingers around the root and pressed twice in quick succession, a simple binary question. "Are you helping me?" The response was immediate. The root flared with a brilliant, urgent light, its rhythmic pulse quickening. It tugged more firmly now, pulling her deeper into the tunnel with a new sense of purpose. The energy in the air began to change, thickening with a palpable hum that raised the hairs on her arms. The narrow passageway suddenly widened, the ceiling vaulting upward into an impossible space. The root released her wrist and retracted into the wall, its job complete. Elara stood at the edge of a cavern, so vast its ceiling was lost in shadow, the air itself vibrating with a power so immense it felt like standing at the heart of a silent, sleeping storm. This was no tomb of stone, but a living engine. Before her, a vast machine of entwined roots and crystalline structures pulsed with a deep, resonant energy. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and damp earth, a strange fusion of the organic and the arcane. Elara's training took over. She raised her botanical scanner, its delicate sensors humming as they mapped the invisible currents of power flowing through the chamber. The device painted a picture of a vast, interconnected network, a circulatory system for the entire forest. The energy flowed strongest toward a central dais, a console grown from polished, dark wood and embedded with shimmering crystal keys. Compelled by a desperate hope, she approached the console, her scanner, still active and probing, inadvertently synced with the ancient interface. The air above the console shimmered, and a three-dimensional map of the green abyss bloomed into existence. It was breathtaking, a luminous web of life force, but it was also dying. Across the holographic expanse, dozens of points flickered with a weak, sickly yellow light. They were failing, one by one, and at the very center of the map, one node burned with a fierce, brilliant white, a heart struggling to power a body with too many blocked arteries. Her breath caught. Her intrusion had not broken this system. It was already breaking. Her tampering now, however well-intentioned, could be the final push that shattered it completely. Or worse, her actions might be a beacon, alerting whatever silent, patient guardians slept within these walls. The fear was a cold knot in her stomach, but the image of her village's withered crops was sharper, more urgent. She had to try. Selecting the nearest failing node on the map, she cross-referenced its energy signature with her scanner's data. The problem was a simple blockage, a constriction in the flow. Using a finely calibrated laser from her kit, she aimed for the corresponding crystal conduit on the console. It was a minor adjustment, a gentle nudge to clear the path. She fired the beam. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, a surge of vibrant, healthy green light erupted from the console, flooding the chamber with a wave of pure, revitalizing energy. The holographic map updated instantly, the sickly yellow node now glowing a steady, strong green. A wave of profound relief washed over her. She had done it. She had healed a small part of this ancient world, but her triumph was horrifically short-lived. A deep, resonant chime echoed through the cavern, a single, clear note that was neither metal nor wood. It was a sound of alarm, of awakening. The note hung in the air, and from the deepest shadows at the edge of the chamber, a figure emerged. It was tall and humanoid, woven from living vines and plates of ancient, gnarled bark. It moved with a silent, fluid grace, and its eyes, fixed upon her, glowed with a soft, intelligent, and utterly alien luminescence. The Guardian stood as a silent, living wall between her and the heart of the machine. Its luminous eyes studied her, not with malice, but with an ancient, patient judgment. It did not raise a weapon or clench a fist of thorns. Instead, one long, vine-like arm uncoiled, its tip gesturing slowly toward a section of the root wall, where the vibrant green glow had faded to a sickly, bruised purple. The blighted roots were brittle and weeping, a dark, viscous sap. The unspoken challenge was clear. She was an intruder in a sacred place, and she had to prove she was not a vandal. Her mind raced, the weight of the Guardian's gaze pressing down on her. Failure was not an option. Expulsion into the lightless maze would be a death sentence. But worse would be the knowledge that she had doomed her people by being found unworthy. She dropped her pack, her hands trembling only slightly as she inventoried her meager supplies. This was not a task for lasers or scanners. It was a test of harmony. She selected a knotted blue fungus known for its antiseptic properties and a glob of amber resin she used to seal plant wounds. Using her canteen water and a stone mortar, she ground them into a thick, pungent poultice. With the Guardian watching her every move, she approached the blighted wall. The air around the corruption felt cold and lifeless. She applied the poultice with her bare hands, spreading the mixture gently over the weeping, purple roots. For a long, agonizing moment, nothing happened. Then, a soft green light began to emanate from beneath the poultice. The brittle roots softened, their purple hue receding as healthy, vibrant green flowed back into them. New, tender shoots unfurled from the healed tissue, reaching toward the chamber's energy like a plant toward the sun. The Guardian's imposing form seemed to soften. It bowed its head in a slow, deliberate gesture of acknowledgement. The judgment in its eyes was replaced by a flicker of something new, something like respect. Elara felt a surge of relief, but she knew a simple transaction was not enough. Reaching into a small pouch at her belt, she retrieved a single, dried seed from a drought-resistant plant native to her homeland. It was a piece of her world. She held it out on her palm. The Guardian's vine-like hand extended again, this time with infinite slowness and care. It gently took the seed from her, cradling it for a moment before the seed was absorbed into the weave of its own form, a tiny, promised speck of new life. The alliance was sealed. The Guardian then turned, its glowing eyes fixing on the central dais, the brilliant white heart of the network. A wave of distress visibly passed through its body, causing its form to flicker. It gestured, and the holographic map shifted, revealing the truth. The central Nexus was not just failing, it was actively corrupted, poisoned by a foreign influence. If it collapsed, the entire life force of the Green Abyss would wither and die in an instant, and the catastrophic failure would leach the very vitality from the lands beyond, turning her village and all the surrounding territories into a permanent, lifeless desert. Without a word, the Guardian began to move, leading her deeper into the chamber, its luminous form pulsing with urgency as it guided her toward the source of the blight. The heart of the Green Abyss was a magnificent tree, its trunk so wide it could have housed her entire village, but its core was a horror, a pulsating wound of blackened bark, veined with a sickly, violet light. The air here was thick with a cloying, metallic scent that made her throat tighten. As the Guardian stood watch, its form flickering with distress, Elara moved in, her botanist's instincts overriding her fear. She scraped a sample of the blackened sap onto a slide, her portable analyzer humming to life. The readout was chilling. This was no natural blight or fungal rot. The molecular structure was complex, geometric, and utterly synthetic. It was a parasite, a manufactured weapon designed to hijack and consume life force. The moment her analysis concluded, the parasite seemed to sense her understanding. The violet veins flared, and from the corrupted bark, thorn tendrils, sharp as forged metal, lashed out. The Guardian moved with blinding speed, intercepting the first strike with its own body, a shield of living wood and bark. A crack echoed through the chamber as a deep gash was torn into its arm, leaking not sap, but dimming light. Elara stumbled back, her mind racing. She had to fight back, but her tools were for healing, not combat. The tendrils whipped toward her again, a cage of thorns closing in. In a desperate, split-second decision, she grabbed her botanical scanner. It was designed for gentle spectral analysis, to read the health of a leaf. She cranked its power to maximum, pointed it at the heart of the corruption, and activated its full-spectrum light array. A brilliant, pure white flash filled the cavern. The parasitic tendrils recoiled, hissing as if in pain, their violent purple light flickering and dimming. It was only a temporary reprieve, a stun, but it was the opening she needed. As the light faded, the Guardian, wounded but resolute, placed itself between her and the slowly receding parasite. Elara's eyes were locked on the corruption's core. In that moment of stunned stillness, the pattern within the violet energy became clear. It wasn't random. Woven into the very fabric of the synthetic organism was a distinct, angular sigil, a symbol of interlocking gears and a stylized flame. Her blood ran cold. She had seen this mark before, etched into the covers of forbidden texts in the village archive. It was the emblem of a forgotten order, the Artificers of Ethel, a civilization that had sought to conquer nature, not live with it. They were not myth, they were the source of the poison, and their ancient war had followed her here. That symbol of interlocking gears was a key, unlocking a memory. Elara recalled the old village tales, the whispers of a counter-weapon crafted by the forest's first defenders. They called it the Relic of Purity, a device of last resort designed to scourge this exact synthetic poison. If the Artificers had created a plague, then the Guardians had forged an antidote. It had to be here, hidden within the very heart it was built to protect. She turned to the wounded Guardian, its light still flickering from the deep gash. She had no shared language, only shared purpose. Pointing first at the corrupting sigil, and then at the ground beneath the great tree, she mimed the act of searching, of finding something hidden. The Guardian observed her for a long, tense moment, then gave a slow, understanding nod. It led her to the base of the massive trunk, where the great roots plunged into the earth. Its uninjured arm probed the living wood, its touch causing a section of intertwined roots to glow with a soft, intricate pattern. A panel, perfectly camouflaged, ear-eyes open with a gentle sigh, revealing a small, sealed compartment. Inside, resting on a bed of luminous moss, was the relic. It was a crystalline orb, no larger than her fist, pulsing with a deep, resonant green light that felt like the first breath of spring after a long winter. The moment her fingers brushed its cool, smooth surface, she understood the cost. A wave of profound understanding flowed into her, not as words, but as pure instinct. This device did not run on sunlight or stored power. It required a sacrifice of life force, a voluntary gift of biological energy to catalyze its cleansing light. To use it was to offer a piece of oneself. Her eyes met the Guardian's, and in its luminous gaze, she saw the same grim acceptance. It was already wounded, its energy compromised. The responsibility fell to her. This was the final test, beyond skill or knowledge. It was a test of faith, Without hesitation, Elara cupped the relic in both hands and closed her eyes. She focused on the memory of rain on green leaves, of her mother's laughter, of the hope that had driven her into this abyss. Then, she willed her own vitality to flow into the crystal. It was like a plug had been pulled from her soul. A wave of dizziness washed over her knees buckled, and a cold sweat broke out on her skin. She felt a decade of her life force drain away in a matter of seconds. But as she weakened, the relic blazed with an incandescent green fury. A wave of pure, harmonic energy erupted from the orb, washing over the corrupted trunk. The violent purple veins recoiled, hissing and sputtering as the light scoured them away. The blackened bark began to flake off, revealing healthy, living wood beneath. The relic had worked, but the parasite, in its death throes, focused its entire remaining malice on the source of its destruction. The remaining thorn tendrils, now withered and black, thrashed wildly, aiming directly for the weakened Elara. As the blinding green light receded, it revealed something new where the corruption had been burned away. A previously hidden archway, overgrown and sealed for centuries, now stood open in the cleansed trunk, revealing a dark, downward passage that led into the deepest, most secret core of the ancient tree. The passage into the tree's core was not made of stone, but of hardened, crystalline sap that pulsed with a soft, residual energy. At its center stood a single pedestal, its surface a mosaic of interlocking leaves carved from luminous green stone. The relic in Elara's hand flared in response, its light syncing with the pedestal. The moment she placed the orb into a perfect depression at its center, the world dissolved around her. She was no longer in a chamber. She was adrift in a river of living memory. Visions flooded her senses, not as pictures on a screen, but as lived experiences. She saw the architects, a people with skin like polished wood and eyes that held the light of stars. They did not build with steel and fire, but with guided growth and harmonic resonance, weaving the very trees into a planetary engine designed to nurture and sustain all life. The green abyss was not a wilderness, it was their greatest masterpiece, a self-regulating heart for the world. But then came the war. The vision shifted to a stark, metallic city under a blood-red sky, the Artificers of Ethel. She felt their philosophy, a cold belief that nature was a resource to be dominated, a chaotic force to be tamed and consumed. She witnessed the creation of the Parasite, a synthetic organism designed with one purpose: to drain biological energy and feed the Artificers' insatiable machines. The memory was a scream of dying forests and a world being eaten from the inside out. The weight of this lost history threatened to crush her, a tidal wave of tragic grandeur and ancient pain. She saw the architect's final, desperate act, to go dormant and hide the key to their revival here, in this sacred heart, hoping a future generation would be wiser. But Elara could not afford to drown in their sorrow. The Parasite was already breaking through the relic's cleansing barrier, its violet light flickering menacingly at the edges of the memory chamber. Cracks began to spider web across the crystalline walls. She forced her mind to focus, sifting through the torrent of history for one specific piece of data, the activation sequence for a full system reboot. It was like trying to catch a single leaf in a hurricane. She found it, a pattern of resonant frequencies visualized as a dancing, intricate pattern of light. She burned it into her mind, repeating the sequence over and over, ignoring the collapsing world around her. With a final, wrenching effort, she snatched the relic from the pedestal. The memory river vanished, and the chamber shuddered violently, great shards of crystal crashing down around her. She sprinted for the archway as the entrance sealed itself shut with a roar of falling stone, the relic in her hand now burning with a fierce, urgent heat. The central chamber became a frantic race against decay. Elara and the Guardian sprinted toward a Nexus where the great tree's roots fused into a single, colossal trunk, its surface alive with the shimmering patterns of a natural supercomputer. This was the primary control node, the brain of the entire forest. The activation sequence from the memory chamber burned in her mind, a complex melody of light and life. She had to play it on this living instrument. The relic in her hand flared as she touched the first root conduit. A deep, resonant hum answered her touch, and a wave of healthy green light pulsed outward from the point of contact, racing through the network. One by one, she followed the sequence, her fingers tracing a path only she could see. With each correct connection, another section of the root system ignited with light and sound, the harmonies building into a powerful, revitalizing symphony. But the parasite was not defeated. It fought back with a vicious, mechanical intelligence. As Elara reached for the fifth root, a whip-like tendril of blackened wood shot from the ceiling, aiming to sever the connection. She threw herself sideways, the thorn tip slicing through the air where her hand had been. The Guardian moved in a blur of motion, intercepting the next assault, its body a shield of bark and resolve. More tendrils erupted from the walls, a coordinated assault on the fragile, glowing roots. Elara knew she could not complete the sequence while also defending it. Her eyes met the Guardian's, and with a sharp gesture, she pointed to the largest, most critical root conduit, the one that would carry the final, stabilizing command. A silent understanding passed between them. The Guardian planted itself before the designated root, its form a bulwark against the storm of thorns, buying her the precious seconds she needed. The stakes were absolute. She could feel the system's fragility through the relic, a delicate web of energy on the verge of shattering. One misstep, one root touched out of order, would not simply fail. It would create a catastrophic feedback loop, a surge of power that would tear the Nexus apart from the inside out, obliterating the last hope for both the forest and her world. Her hands trembled not from fear, but from the immense concentration required, her mind a fortress against the chaos. She blocked out the sounds of conflict, the shuddering impacts as the Guardian held its ground. There was only the sequence, the next route, and the next. She touched the second to last conduit. The hum rose to a deafening crescendo. Then, with the parasite's final, desperate lunge shattering against the Guardian's form, Elara pressed her palm against the last root. For a heartbeat, there was only silence. Then the entire chamber erupted in a blinding, emerald light so pure it felt like being born, and the ground beneath her feet began to tremble with a power reborn. The emerald light did not fade, it intensified, saturating the air with a palpable hum of restored power. Across the vast chamber, the intricate web of roots blazed with a vibrant, healthy green, and the last vestiges of the violet parasite hissed and crackled, their synthetic forms shriveling into brittle, black dust as their stolen energy was violently reclaimed. The entire structure groaned in protest. A deep, seismic shudder running through the stone and wood as the ancient system strained under the sudden, massive influx of power. Fissures snaked across the walls, and dust rained from the ceiling. The rebirth of the green abyss was a beautiful, volatile cataclysm. Elara's moment of triumph was instantly swallowed by the immediate need for survival. The way they had come was now a chasm of falling debris. She looked at the Guardian, its form flickering weakly, the deep gash from the Parasite still leaking dim light. It gestured toward a far wall where a new, jagged crack offered a sliver of hope, a potential route upward. They moved as one, scrambling over shifting ground. Elara clutched the relic, its warmth a desperate comfort. She understood its nature now, a focus for will as much as a tool for power. Pouring her remaining strength into it, she focused on a single, clear command, a path. The relic flared, and a line of pure, solid light erupted from its core, etching a stable, glowing bridge across a newly formed crevasse and illuminating a treacherous climb up a collapsing root system. It was their only way out. They were almost there, the promise of open air just beyond a final, trembling archway, when a monumental slab of stone broke loose from above, crashing down to block the exit entirely. The Guardian did not hesitate. It turned to her, its luminous eyes holding a final, profound peace. It placed a hand on the relic in her grasp, and in that touch, Elara felt not a goodbye, but a transfer. Its physical form, the ancient bark and woven vines, began to dissolve into motes of gentle green light that flowed into the crystal orb. Its consciousness, its memories, its very essence, became one with the relic, a permanent guardian within the heart of the system it had died to save. The stone slab, now bereft of its supporting pressure, shuddered and rose just enough. Elara scrambled through the narrow gap. The warm crystal clutched to her chest and tumbled out onto soft, living moss. She lay there, gasping, as the ground finally stilled. The oppressive silence of the abyss was gone, replaced by a symphony. The forest around her was vibrating with life, leaves shimmering with an internal radiance, the very air tasting of rain and blooming flowers. The relic in her hand was now warm and silent, a quiet vessel holding an ancient, noble soul. She had the cure for her dying world, but she carried a far greater responsibility, the living memory of a forgotten age now reborn. The world outside the green abyss seemed smaller, muted, as Elara walked back into her village. She carried no sacks of gold or chests of jewels, only a quiet crystal orb and a weariness that went deeper than her bones. The elders met her at the edge of the withered fields, their faces a mixture of hope and stern disapproval. They saw only a dusty, exhausted woman who had defied their most sacred law. One of the elders, a man named Kale, pointed a trembling finger at a plot of crops that was completely blackened, a blight they had been powerless to stop. His voice was brittle with despair. "This is what your recklessness has brought us," he accused, "nothing but more death." Elara did not argue. She simply knelt in the dry soil, the dormant relic cool in her hand. Closing her eyes, she reached for the connection she had forged deep within the abyss, for the gentle presence of the Guardian now residing within the crystal. She did not command, she asked. A soft, verdant light kindled within the orb, then flowed down her arm and into the earth. The blackened stalks trembled. Before the disbelieving eyes of the entire village, the blight receded like a shadow, fleeing the sun. Healthy green shoots pushed up through the cracked soil, unfurling new leaves that glistened with morning dew in the arid air. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. The rigid anger in Elder Kale's face shattered into awe, then into a profound, humbling shame. He bowed his head, not to her, but to the power she carried. The younger generation, however, saw something else entirely. They did not see a power to be feared, but a future to be built. They crowded around her, their eyes alight with questions. How did it work? Could they learn? Could the entire land be healed? Yet not every heart was open. Skeptics muttered that such power was unnatural, a trick that would demand a terrible price. They remembered the old stories of the artificers and feared that any power from the forbidden forest was a path to ruin. Elara understood their fear. She had felt it herself in the dark. She decided then that she would not rule or command. She would teach. She began that very afternoon, gathering a small, willing group by the newly healed field. The first lesson was not about grand gestures, but about listening. She had them place their hands on the soil and feel not just its dryness, but its potential, the faint, sleeping song of life that still persisted. This knowledge would be shared slowly, carefully, building a new harmony between her people and the land. But word travels fast across a thirsty world. Within days, a delegation arrived from a wealthy, industrial settlement to the east. Their leader, a man named Vorlag, saw the miraculously healed field and did not see a miracle of life. He saw a commodity. He offered Elara vast sums of money for the relic, speaking of irrigation efficiency and profit margins. When she refused, his smile remained, but his eyes turned cold. He warned her that such a power was too great for a single village to hoard, and that the world would soon come knocking. As Elara continued her lesson, teaching her first students how to sense the subtle rhythms of a sprouting seed, a familiar, gentle pulse warmed the relic against her chest. It was a quiet, reassuring thrum, a reminder that the heart of the green abyss was still beating in time with her own. The first true lesson began in the quiet of a sheltered grove, with Elara placing simple, resonant stones into the hands of her 5 most dedicated students. These were not tools of command, she explained, but instruments of introduction, a way to find a common rhythm with the silent life around them. The goal was humble, to encourage a small, stubborn grove of berry bushes to offer a late-season harvest. For days, the students practiced, their focus not on forcing growth, but on listening to the plant's slow, seasonal song and gently harmonizing with it. When the first cluster of deep blueberries swelled and ripened days later, it felt less like magic and more like a conversation, finally understood. The village celebrated this small miracle, their skepticism giving way to a fragile, burgeoning hope. This newfound confidence, however, proved to be a double-edged sword. A young student named Lyra, brilliant and impatient, believed she had mastered the principles. Driven by a desire to prove herself, she attempted a complex resonance pattern meant for ancient, deeply rooted trees on a simple vegetable patch. The result was not a bounty, but a horror. The carrots twisted into grotesque, knotted shapes, their leaves thickening into leathery, unnatural scales. A wave of panic swept through the village. The old fears resurfaced in terrified whispers, accusations that they were tampering with forces that would inevitably corrupt the land. Elara did not scold Lyra. She stood before the mutated plants and the frightened crowd, her own heart heavy with responsibility. This was her failure as a teacher. She approached the twisted vegetables, the relic warm in her palm. She did not erase the mistake, but instead poured a gentle, corrective energy into the soil, a lullaby of restoration that guided the plants back to their true, balanced form. As the leathery scales softened into familiar leaves, she turned to her students and the villagers. This was not a lesson about power, she told them quietly, but about listening. True harmony requires respecting the natural song, not overriding it with our own ambitions. The success of her school now balanced on a knife's edge. She had to demonstrate perfect control, proving this path was one of safety and reverence, not reckless experimentation. Every lesson was now conducted under the watchful, anxious eyes of the entire community. But another set of eyes had also witnessed the incident, hidden among the trees at the grove's edge. The outsider from Vorlag's industrial settlement saw the twisted plants not as a warning, but as a thrilling breakthrough. He did not see a failure of balance. He saw the raw potential to reshape nature itself, to create new, profitable forms of life that could be owned and sold. The metallic scent of industry arrived with the scout from Ironhold, a sharp contrast to the grove's earthy perfume. He was a man of clean angles and polished buttons, his eyes calculating the worth of every leaf and stone. He did not ask for an audience. He presented a contract, offering unimaginable wealth and the full military protection of Ironhold in exchange for what he called the growth technology. The village, still healing from Lyra's mistake, fractured on the spot. The younger, more ambitious members saw gleaming futures free from toil and drought. But Elder Kale and others stood firm, their faces etched with a deep, ancestral dread. To them, this was not a bargain, it was a sacrilege, a betrayal of the sacred trust Elara had fought so hard to earn. The air grew thick with the tension of a choice between survival and soul. Elara felt the weight of their divided gazes, the future of her people balanced against the silent, watching presence of the abyss. She looked at the scout, at his empty smile, and her answer was quiet and absolute. "This knowledge is not a tool to be sold," she stated, her voice carrying across the tense crowd. "It is a relationship. It requires respect, not a transaction." The scout's polished demeanor did not crack, but a coldness entered his eyes. He carefully folded the unsigned contract. "A pity," he said, his tone deceptively light. "Ironhold thrives on progress. We will find a way to cultivate this resource, with or without a guide." His words were a quiet thunderclap, a promise of conflict that lingered long after he had gone. That night, sleep would not come. The relic at her chest pulsed with a low, anxious rhythm. Driven by its unease, Elara walked to the village sacred spring, the heart of their meager water supply. The moonlight revealed a series of impressions in the mud at the water's edge, clear and precise. They were not the marks of an animal or a villager's boot. They were geometric, metallic, and utterly foreign, leading directly into the dark, silent woods. The silence of the forest was now a warning. Elara saw the metallic tracks leading from the spring, and knew Ironhold would not wait. They had to defend themselves, but not with the swords and spears of a forgotten age. Their only true shield was the land itself. She gathered the villagers, her voice calm but urgent as she explained the plan. They would not build a wall of stone, but grow one, a living barrier of quick thorn vines, a species that responded fiercely to harmonic encouragement. The work began at dawn. The entire village, from the youngest apprentice to Elder Kale himself, formed a circle around their home. Their hands were placed on the soil, and they began to hum, not a melody, but a steady, resonant frequency that Elara taught them, a call to growth and protection. The response was immediate and astonishing. Seeds sown into the perimeter shuddered and sprouted, tendrils of deep green lacing upward at a visible pace, thickening into woody stems armed with needle-sharp thorns. The vines wove themselves together, climbing higher and higher, forming a dense, impenetrable thicket that hummed with the collective energy poured into it. But the effort was immense. Sweat beaded on brows, and people swayed with exhaustion, their strength flowing directly into the earth. This was the ultimate test of their newfound unity, a single cord of shared purpose that would snap if even one person faltered. As the living wall reached its full height, Elara made a difficult choice. She could not risk the children, nor the relic, in the coming conflict. Taking only a trusted few, she led the youngest villagers and the pulsating crystal to a hidden grove deep within the safe, ancient part of the woods. This was a place of old power, where the trees themselves seemed to watch and listen, a sanctuary she had discovered in her earliest explorations. She entrusted the grove's secret to the eldest child, making them swear to stay silent and safe. Returning to the village, the news from her scouts was grim. Ironhold was not sending a mere delegation. They were marching with a full contingent of laborers and guards, their wagons laden with saws that gleamed with cruel, sharp teeth, and nozzles connected to tanks of volatile fire oil, tools designed for one purpose: to cut and burn through any organic matter. The unity of the village, so hard-won, now faced its truest trial not from within, but from the cold, industrial might approaching their borders. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold, a new light appeared in the distance, a line of flickering torches moving steadily closer, signaling the arrival of the Ironhold caravan. The first axe bit into the living wall with a sickening crunch. Ironhold's heated blades, glowing a dull orange, sliced through the thorny vines like they were mere twigs, each strike releasing a puff of steam and the sharp, sweet scent of dying sap. Elara stood firm, her hands pressed to the ground, feeling every wound inflicted upon their living shield. Beside her, the villagers hummed their steady, resonant frequency, their collective will pushing the vines to regrow, to writhe and entangle the armored limbs of the attackers. For a time, it worked. Men cried out as thorns snagged their gear, and new growth lashed around their legs, pulling them down. But it was a brutal exchange, a war of inches fought with life force. With every vine that was cut, Elara felt a piece of the village's energy wither, a slow, draining fatigue that spread through the circle like a poison. She could see it in the slumping shoulders and strained faces around her. They were losing a battle of attrition, trading their vitality for mere minutes. Through the chaotic din, Elara's mind raced, a strategist assessing a crumbling front. The primary wall was failing, and a stand here was to be bled dry. Her eyes darted to the center of the village, to the elder tree, an ancient, massive oak whose roots were said to touch the deepest aquifers. That tree held a reservoir of old, patient strength. "Retreat," she commanded, her voice cutting through the hum. "Fall back to the elder tree. Now, It was a desperate gamble, ceding ground to the invaders, but it was their only chance. The villagers broke their circle, their song faltering as they scrambled back through the lanes, their once vibrant wall now a tangle of severed, blackened stems. The Ironhold force, sensing victory, pressed forward with renewed vigor, their leader, Vorlag, barking orders from the rear. It was then that the true nature of their enemy was revealed. As the villagers formed a new, tighter circle around the massive trunk of the elder tree, Vorlag's laborers hauled a strange, brass-ribbed device to the front. It was a sonic cannon, its wide bell aimed directly at their last defense. With a piercing whine that set teeth on edge, it unleashed an invisible wave of force. The effect was immediate and horrifying. The vibrant green vines still guarding the elder tree did not just stop growing, they recoiled. Their color faded to a brittle gray, the thorns dropping away like dust, and the leaves curling inward as if burned by an unseen fire. The resonant frequency of the village, their song of life, was shattered by a dissonant scream that choked the very will from the plants. The primary defense was broken. Now backed against the elder tree in the village square, the air thick with the acrid smell of the sonic weapon, Elara faced the grim truth. Their harmony was not enough. Ironhold's technology was designed to dominate nature, not converse with it. To simply endure was to die. All eyes turned to her, filled with a terror that mirrored the cold dread in her own heart. She looked from their desperate faces to the relic's hiding place deep in the woods, knowing its discovery would mean the end of everything. But to use its power here, openly, was to risk a different kind of corruption, to reveal the very heart of the secret they were fighting to protect. The sonic cannon powered up for another blast, its whine rising to an unbearable pitch. There was no more time for caution, only for faith. She closed her eyes, reaching not for the physical orb, but for the bond she shared with the Guardian sleeping within it, and prepared to awaken a storm. Her feet flew across the moss, the hidden grove welcoming her with a breath of cool, ancient air. The relic pulsed in her hands as she lifted it, its light answering the frantic beat of her heart. She did not run back to the village square, but to the elder tree itself, pressing her back against its gnarled, immense trunk. The sonic cannon's whine reached a fever pitch, and she could feel the tree shudder in protest. Closing her eyes, she did not reach for anger or violence. She reached for the memory of the green abyss in its full, vibrant glory, the feeling of a world in perfect, singing balance. She poured that memory into the relic, and it answered with a force that nearly tore her apart. A wave of emerald light erupted from the crystal, not as a destructive blast, but as a swift, silent tide of pure life. It washed over the Ironhold force, and where it touched, their reality unraveled. The heated blades of their axes flaked into orange rust that fell like snow. The brass ribs of the sonic cannon corroded in an instant, its terrible whine choking into silence as the device became a lump of verdigris. Leather straps stiffened and cracked, synthetic fabrics in their uniforms frayed into dust, and the tanks of fire oil seeped harmlessly into the earth through disintegrated nozzles. The wave was exquisitely precise. It did not so much as rust a single nail in a village home or wither a single hair on a soldier's head. It only consumed the inorganic, the manufactured, the things that were not born of the soil. Elara felt the immense power flowing through her, a torrent that threatened to wash her own consciousness away. She was a channel, a fragile vessel for an ocean, and she had to focus every ounce of her will on a single, impossible command: life for the living, dust for the dead. She held the line, her body trembling with the strain, until the last echo of the light faded from the air. The silence that followed was profound. The Ironhold soldiers stood bewildered, clutching useless hilts, their advanced technology now just so much scrap metal at their feet. Vorlag, his fine, polished armor now a pitted, brittle shell, slowly raised his head. His eyes were no longer filled with cold calculation, but with a raw, stunned awe as he looked past Elara at the village. The elder tree, touched by the wave, now seemed to glow from within, its leaves a more vibrant green, its bark radiating a palpable warmth. The very air smelled sweeter, and the recently healed fields in the distance shimmered with renewed health. He was not looking at a resource to be plundered anymore. He was looking at a power beyond his comprehension, a force that could not be bought or broken, only respected. The relic in Elara's hand was now warm and quiet. Its light dimmed, but the attention it had drawn was brighter and more dangerous than ever. The silence after the emerald wave was a fragile, humming thing. A woman stepped forward from the ranks of the bewildered Ironhold soldiers, pushing back the hood of her travel-stained cloak. Her face was sharp with intelligence and exhaustion, not cruelty. "I am Kaelin," she said, her voice clear and steady. "I lead this expedition. We came for a resource, but we have witnessed a power. I ask for a truce, not a surrender." Elara studied her, the memory of heated blades and sonic screams still raw. She would not meet in the open, not with so much fear still souring the air. She gestured toward the elder tree. "We will speak there, under its branches, or not at all." Kaelin, to her credit, did not hesitate. She dismissed her personal guard and walked alone into the dappled shade of the ancient oak, a place where the very air seemed to listen. Within that circle of old power, Kaelin's pragmatic facade cracked. "Her city is not a place of greedy conquerors," she explained, "but a dying giant. Their deep mines are empty, their soil is poisoned by generations of industry, and their people are starving. They did not seek the power of the green abyss for conquest, but for survival, a desperate attempt to force life back into a corpse of a land." Her words painted a picture not so different from Elara's own parched memories, just on a terrifying, metallic scale. Elara felt a dangerous pull of empathy. Could she trust the word of someone who had just tried to burn and shatter her home? To believe Kaelin was to risk everything on a stranger's desperation. To refuse was to condemn an entire city to a slow, hungry death, and likely invite an even greater, more ruthless force to her doorstep later. Compassion warred with a deep, ingrained caution. "A compromise, then," she said, her decision firming as she spoke. "I will not give you the relic. Its power cannot be owned, only shared, but I will not let your people starve. I will send envoys, my most trusted students, to Ironhold. They will teach you not how to command the land, but how to listen to it. They will show you how to heal your soil with symbiotic fungi and coax water from deep aquifers with resonant tones. It is a slower path, but it is the only one that leads to true life." Kaelin absorbed this, her eyes showing a flicker of something like relief, quickly masked by a familiar grimness. She nodded, a sharp, decisive motion. "I accept your terms, but you must understand, my authority only extends so far. There are factions in Ironhold, industrialists and militarists. who wanted me to take your relic by any means necessary. They will see this compromise as a failure. They will still covet the crystal you hold. As their hands met in a formal clasp to seal the agreement, a cold tremor ran up Elara's spine, a sensation entirely separate from the tree's warm bark against her back. It was a silent, psychic shudder from the depths of the green abyss, a warning that the true danger had not been averted, but had merely changed its shape. Ironhold rose from the plains like a fortress of rust and dust, a landscape of geometric shapes and grinding machinery under a sky stained gray with perpetual smoke. The air tasted of metal and ash, a stark contrast to the living breath of the forest. Elara walked beside her two students, Lyra and Corin, their simple hemp clothing marking them as outsiders in a crowd of people clad in stiff, utilitarian fabrics. Every stare felt like a physical blow, a mixture of raw curiosity and open hostility. They were not welcomed as saviors, but viewed as curiosities, purveyors of a soft, strange magic that had no place in a world of levers and pistons. Their classroom was a designated plot of land on the city's barren outskirts, soil so poisoned by industrial runoff, it was little more than hard-packed grit. The traditionalists, led by a hulking foreman named Brant, watched their every move with arms crossed and skeptical scowls. When Lyra and Corin began their first lesson, instructing a small, wary group on how to feel for the land's dormant song, Brant laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You want us to sing to the dirt," he mocked, kicking at the gray earth. "A strong axe and a hotter fire, that's what this ground understands." The doubt was a poison more insidious than the soil's toxins. Elara saw the flicker of uncertainty in Lyra's eyes, the same brilliant student who had once been so impatient for results. The simplicity of Ironhold's way, the immediate, tangible force of a hammer or a saw, was a seductive contrast to their slow, meticulous work that showed no visible progress for days. She saw Lyra's hands clench, a temptation to prove them wrong with a flashy, forceful display of power. Elara knew then that a lecture on philosophy would be useless. They needed a demonstration that even Brant could not ignore. She chose the most visible, most desolate patch of earth, right at the edge of the main thoroughfare, where the entire city could witness it. "This is not a song," she announced, her voice carrying over the muttering crowd. "It is a conversation, and today the land will answer." She did not use the relic. Instead, she used every principle she had learned in the green abyss, harmonizing not with one plant, but with the entire microscopic ecosystem of the soil. She and her students worked in a focused silence, their hands on the ground, their will a gentle, insistent pressure. They called not for rapid, unnatural growth, but for balance, encouraging the symbiotic bacteria and fungi that could break down the poisons and restore fertility. For hours, nothing happened. The mockery grew louder. Then, as the sun began to dip, a faint green haze appeared on the surface of the dirt. Tiny, resilient shoots of cleansing clover and deep-rooted nettles pushed upward, their leaves unfurling at a visible, breathtaking pace. By nightfall, the dead plot was a thriving, waist-high patch of vibrant green, buzzing with newly awakened insects. The crowd fell utterly silent. Brant stared, his mouth agape, his earlier mockery wiped away by sheer, undeniable evidence. The success was a victory that rippled through the city, creating a swell of desperate hope and new supporters. But as Elara stood in their small, allotted quarters that night, the adulation felt like a cage. Making the technology this visible had made her, and the power she represented, a beacon. The relic felt heavy against her chest, its secret now the worst kept one in Ironhold. Restless, she stepped outside for air and saw a furtive movement near the supply sheds. Silhouetted in the dim light of a lone electric lamp was Lyra, speaking in hushed, urgent tones with a man whose sharp, tailored uniform marked him as one of Kalen's political rivals. The sight of Lyra whispering with the uniformed man sent a cold jolt through Elara's veins. She did not confront her there, in the open, but waited, her heart a heavy stone in her chest, until she could summon the young woman to the sparse quiet of their quarters. Under the dim, flickering electric light, the truth tumbled out. Lyra's confession was a torrent of wounded pride and desperate ambition. The man was a chief lieutenant to Director Vorlag, Kalen's rival, and he had offered Lyra everything she had ever secretly wanted: a prestigious laboratory in Ironhold, a team of researchers under her command, and the resources to conduct experiments on a scale she could never dream of in the village. All she had to do was provide the schematics of the relic's energy signature and the location where it was kept. He had preyed upon her brilliance and her impatience, flattering her into believing she was wasted on small-scale farming and that her genius deserved a grander stage. Elara listened, her disappointment a physical ache. This was not the failure of a student, but the failure of a teacher who had not seen the crack in a foundation she thought was solid. Her affection for Lyra warred with a crushing sense of duty. The fragile peace with an entire city, the safety of the relic, the very future of the symbiotic technology, all of it now hung by a thread because of one person's temptation. Compassion demanded she try to reason with Lyra, to reclaim her, but prudence, cold and hard, insisted that the risk was too great. With a sorrow that threatened to choke her, Elara made the call. She placed Lyra under guard in their quarters, a temporary confinement that felt like a betrayal of its own. There was no time for lengthy reconciliation. The opposing faction now knew their inside informant was compromised. Elara's mind, honed in the green abyss, raced toward a solution. The original relic was a single point of catastrophic failure. She needed to decentralize the power, to create a network of smaller, focused relics, each attuned to a specific purpose: healing, growth, protection, and purification. No single one would hold the awesome power of the original, but together they would form a resilient, distributed web of harmony that could not be so easily stolen or shattered. She immediately summoned Corin and began drafting the intricate resonant patterns, a project that would require all their remaining energy and focus. But out in the metallic night, their window of opportunity was already slamming shut. The faction that had courted Lyra, realizing their subtle plot had failed, abandoned all pretense of political maneuvering. The sudden, brutal clash of metal on metal and raised, angry shouts that erupted from the city's central square were not the sounds of a protest. It was the unmistakable, terrifying noise of a coup. The roar of the coup shattered Ironhold's uneasy peace, a tide of armored traditionalists flooding the central square. From a high window, Elara saw Vorlik, a figure of pure, charismatic fury, leading the charge straight for the leadership hall, where Kalen and her loyalists were cornered. There was no time for a weapon, no time for a wall. Her only thought was sanctuary. She slammed the relic against the stone floor, pouring a single, desperate command into its core, not to attack, but to defend. From the flagstones, a dome of interwoven, hardened wood erupted with explosive speed, sealing Kalen's group inside just as the mob reached the doors. The impact of hammers and axes against the living barrier sent shudders through the structure, but it held an impenetrable shell. They were safe, but they were also trapped, prisoners in a small, dim space, with only the air and water they had on them. Outside, Vorlik's triumphant shouts confirmed he now controlled the settlement. Inside, the air grew thick with panic and dwindling oxygen. Elara moved among the frightened officials, her voice a calm counterpoint to the chaos. She had to de-escalate, to show force without cruelty. Closing her eyes, she reached through the relic, her consciousness flowing into the sparse plant life of the city, the weeds in the cracks, the decorative ivy on the walls. Across Ironhold, a silent miracle unfolded. Every sword, every axe held by Vorlik's men, suddenly sprouted delicate, fragrant flowers from their hilts and blades. Tough, pliable vines crept from the ground, not to strangle, but to gently coil around the wrists and ankles of the most aggressive fighters, holding them in a firm but harmless embrace. It was a display of such overwhelming, benevolent power that the fighting simply stopped. The message was undeniable. She could disarm them all without shedding a single drop of blood. Vorlik, however, was beyond reason. Humiliated and enraged by this peaceful display, he screamed new orders, redirecting his entire force not against the other loyalists, but against the wooden dome. Sledges, rams, and even scorching torches were brought to bear, a concentrated, brutal assault on their sanctuary. With every thunderous blow against the dense wood, Elara flinched, feeling the relic's warm pulse in her hand grow fainter. It was a finite well of energy, and she was drawing from it too fast. The vibrant green of the dome's interior began to dull to a weary brown. It could not hold forever, and when it fell, there would be no second chance for mercy. The dome groaned, its wooden fibers splintering under the relentless assault. Inside, the air was thin and tasted of dust and fear. Elara met Kalen's grim gaze and saw the same stark conclusion. There would be no more hiding, no more subtle defenses. This conflict had to be resolved, not with a siege, but with a choice the entire city could witness. She shouted her proposal through the thinning wall, her voice cutting through the din of hammers. A duel, she declared, not of weapons, but of will. She would face Vorlik in a contest to heal a patch of land he had deliberately poisoned, with the leadership of Ironhold as the prize. The pounding stopped. A moment of stunned silence was followed by Vorlik's booming, arrogant laugh. He accepted without hesitation, confident his brute force methods could easily overwhelm her delicate, nonsensical songs. For him, it was a chance to publicly humiliate her and legitimize his takeover. For Elara, it was a gamble with everything at stake. If she failed, Vorlik would seize the relic and crush the old ways forever. If she won, she would inherit the monumental task of leading a broken, suspicious people toward a future they did not yet understand. She made one more critical decision. She would not use the relic. This victory had to be won by skill and harmony alone, a testament to the power she preached, not the artifact she protected. The designated plot was a horror, a small square of earth near the main forge, that Vorlik's men had drenched in concentrated chemical waste. The soil was black and sticky, giving off a sharp, acrid smell that made the onlookers cough. The crowd, a sea of anxious and hostile faces, formed a wide circle around the blighted ground. Vorlik stood on one side, a smirk plastered on his face, as his team rolled out drums of industrial neutralizers and injectors filled with synthetic growth serum. Elara stood on the other with Corin and a handful of her newly converted Ironhold students. Their tools simple, baskets of specific fungi, clay pots of clean water, and their own bare hands. The difference in their approaches was a physical chasm between two worlds. As they stood over the poisoned earth, the entire settlement fell into a breathless hush, waiting for the contest to begin. Vorlik wasted no time, barking orders to his crew as they pumped the blackened soil with harsh chemical neutralizers. The ground hissed and steamed, the air filling with a caustic smell that made the crowd step back. Next came the synthetic growth serum, injected deep with metal syringes. The response was immediate and grotesquely spectacular. Thick, gnarled stalks shot upward, unfurling broad leaves of a deep, unnatural purple. Bulbous fruits swelled to an impressive size, their skins gleaming with a waxy, toxic sheen. It was a display of raw, forced power, and a murmur of approval ran through his followers. But the plants themselves were clearly suffering. Their stems contorted painfully, and a sour, medicinal odor rose from them, a sure sign they were inedible, even lethal. Across the small field, Elara and her team worked with a quiet, focused rhythm. They did not attack the poison, but invited life to handle it. They worked the sticky earth with their hands, mixing in rich compost teeming with beneficial bacteria. They introduced carefully selected insects to aerate the soil and break down the contaminants, and they hummed, a low, gentle frequency that seemed to vibrate through the very ground, a call to the land's own latent strength. Progress was achingly slow. Tiny green shoots emerged, fragile but determined, their growth measured in millimeters, not meters. The contrast was stark, and Vorlik's mocking laughter echoed across the square. He pointed at his own towering, monstrous plants. "This is progress. This is power," he bellowed. "Your whispers are a joke," but the joke was on him. As the minutes stretched on, his chemically fueled growth reached its inevitable, catastrophic end. The massive plants, having exhausted the artificial boost, began to sag. Their vibrant purple leaves browned at the edges, curling inward as a black rot spread from their cores. The impressive fruits split open, oozing a black, foul-smelling sap before they shriveled and dropped to the ground, lifeless and useless. In the same moment, Elara's small plot began to truly thrive. The delicate shoots strengthened, their leaves broadening into a healthy, vibrant green. Tender bean vines climbed the simple stakes her students provided, and the first signs of plump, red tomatoes began to form. It was not a monstrous spectacle, but a picture of robust, sustainable life. The crowd stared, the truth dawning on them. Enraged by this quiet victory, Vorlik let out a guttural roar and charged across the field, his boot aimed to crush the fledgling plants. He did not get far. Corin and the other students moved as one, forming a living wall between the man and their work. They did not strike him, they simply stood firm, their resolve a silent, unbreakable barrier. Elara slowly rose from the soil, wiping her hands on her trousers. She did not look at Vorlik. but at the people of Ironhold, their faces a canvas of confusion and dawning hope. You have been taught that strength is about force, about bending the world to your will, she said, her voice calm, but carrying to every corner of the square. But true strength lies not in domination, but in partnership. It is the patience to listen, the wisdom to nurture, and the courage to trust in a power greater than yourself. A power that, when respected, will sustain you forever. Her words, simple and direct, cut through the years of industrial dogma. One by one, the tools in the hands of Vorlik's supporters clattered to the ground. The tide of opinion was turning, visibly and irrevocably. Seeing his authority dissolve before his eyes, Vorlik's face twisted into a mask of pure desperation. His eyes locked not on Elara, but on the small, dormant shape of the relic at her belt. With a final, furious cry, he abandoned all pretense and lunged, his fingers outstretched to seize the source of all his troubles. Vorlik's fingers closed around the relic with a triumphant snarl. The reaction was instantaneous and terrifying. The crystal, a vessel of pure life energy, recognized his violent intent as a poison. It did not fight back with thorns or fire, but with a far more primal defense. It began to consume him. A searing white light erupted from the orb, and Vorlik's triumphant cry twisted into a choked gasp of agony. His body stiffened, his skin paling to a sickly gray as the very vitality was ripped from him. His ambition, his rage, his very life force were being devoured by the very power he sought to steal. Elara stood frozen for a single, suspended heartbeat. She could let it happen. The forest would be safer. Her people would be safer, with this man broken and gone. It was a clean, swift justice, but that was the old way, the way of fear and domination. Her entire journey, every lesson learned in the whispering dark of the green abyss, had been about a different path. To let him die would be to betray everything she now was. With a cry that was part protest, part prayer, she threw herself forward. Her hands closed over his, the relic burning like ice and fire between their palms. She did not try to pull it away. Instead, she willed the connection to shift, to turn the ravenous hunger from him and onto herself. It was like stepping in front of a tidal wave. The drain was absolute, a vortex of cold that sucked the warmth from her blood and the strength from her bones. Her knees buckled, and the world swam in a dizzying gray haze. She felt decades of her life, her memories, her very essence, being pulled into the crystal's core. But she held on, her grip on Vorlik's hands the only anchor in the storm. She would not let the power she served become a weapon of vengeance. A profound silence fell over the square, broken only by Elara's ragged, shuddering breath as she crumpled to the fertile earth, her body spent. Vorlik stumbled back, free from the relic's grip, his own body whole, but his spirit shattered. He stared down at the woman who had nearly died to save him, the enemy he had tried to crush. The relic, still cradled in her limp hand, began to pulse with a new light, a soft, golden warmth that felt like forgiveness. It washed over Elara first, pouring the stolen life force back into her, not as a violent torrent, but as a gentle, restorative rain. Color returned to her cheeks, and she drew a deep, clean breath as the crushing fatigue lifted. Then the light expanded, a wave of gentle gold that flowed across the contest ground and out toward the last, stubbornly poisoned edges of Ironhold. The final stains of chemical waste vanished from the soil, and the air itself seemed to sweeten. The last vestiges of industrial taint scoured away by this final, benevolent sigh. Vorlich looked from the healed land to the woman who had healed it, and the last of his defiance broke. He slowly, deliberately, sank to his knees in the rich, dark soil, his head bowed not in defeat, but in awe. The hunger for power that had defined him was gone, replaced by a humbling, terrifying understanding of what true strength really meant. The soil of the great square, once poisoned, was now rich and dark beneath their feet, as Elara and Kalen clasped hands before the united peoples. This was not a treaty of conquest or a simple trade agreement, but a new covenant, a vow to walk a different path together. Ironhold would dismantle its most polluting machinery and begin the patient work of adopting symbiotic practices, learning to listen to the land it had spent generations dominating. In return, Elara's village would provide teachers and, when absolutely necessary, the gentle, restorative aid of the relic itself. The crystal was no longer a secret to be hoarded or a weapon to be coveted, but a shared treasure, a sacred trust for the healing of the world, not for the wielding of power. Their first great joint project was a testament to this new philosophy, a canal designed not to conquer the landscape, but to follow its natural contours. Workers from both communities labored side by side, not with roaring earth movers, but with careful hands, lining the waterway's banks with specially cultivated, light-giving mosses that glowed with a soft, blue-green luminescence. These living lamps purified the water as it flowed and served as a constant, gentle reminder of the source of their salvation, the green abyss itself. The goal was to channel fresh, clean water from the revived heart of the forest directly to Ironhold's newly healed fields, a literal river of life for the parched city. But the work was far from simple. Old habits and deep-seated suspicions did not vanish overnight. An Ironhold engineer would insist on a perfectly straight, efficient channel, while a village elder would advocate for a meandering path that respected an ancient root system. A foreman used to shouted commands would grow frustrated with a teacher who asked the workers to first feel the resonance of the stones they were placing. These were not major rebellions, but a constant, grinding friction of minor disagreements, each one a potential spark that required Elara and Kalen's constant, patient diplomacy to prevent it from igniting. The success of their grand vision depended entirely on these thousands of small, daily acts of understanding. It was in this fragile environment that Elara made her most controversial decision. She appointed Lyra, her brilliant, repentant student, to lead the first official envoy team to Ironhold. Many in the village were aghast, their trust in the young woman shattered by her earlier betrayal. But Elara saw the profound shame in Lyra's eyes and recognized a powerful need for redemption. By entrusting her with this immense responsibility, she was not just offering forgiveness, she was forging a stronger bond. Lyra's intimate knowledge of Ironhold's culture and her burning desire to make amends made her the perfect, if risky, bridge between the two worlds. She would have to prove her loyalty, not with words, but with unwavering action. The fate of this delicate alliance hung in the balance every single day. Would this shared technology become the foundation for an unprecedented era of peace and prosperity? Or would the old hunger for control slowly corrupt it, making it the root of even greater conflicts in the future? The answer would not be found in a single dramatic moment, but in the quiet, cumulative success of projects like the Great Canal. The day the sluice gates were finally opened, a hush fell over the assembled crowd. The first clear, cold water from the green abyss poured into the meticulously prepared channel, and the moss-lined banks ignited with a soft, ethereal light, guiding the water on its journey. As she watched the life-giving flow begin its work, Elara felt a profound and hard-won sense of peace settle over her. Yet intertwined with that peace was the heavy, unending weight of her responsibility, a burden she knew she would carry for the rest of her days. The decision to return the relic felt like a pilgrimage. Elara walked the familiar path into the green abyss, but the journey was utterly transformed. Where oppressive silence had once reigned, a vibrant symphony of life now thrived. The air hummed with a palpable energy, and the glowing fungi that had once been her only guides now pulsed in complex, joyful patterns across every surface. She found the entrance to the Nexus not as a hidden seam, but as a grand, open archway woven from living roots that pulsed with a gentle, welcoming light. Stepping inside, she gasped. The cavern was no longer a chamber of dormant power, but a cathedral of living energy. The great root machine pulsed with a steady, brilliant green, and the crystalline structures shimmered, casting dancing rainbows across the vaulted ceiling. At the center of it all stood the Guardian. Its form was no longer a patchwork of bark and vines, but a seamless, magnificent sculpture of polished wood and living light, taller and more radiant than she remembered. It turned, and its luminous eyes, now holding a deep, ancient wisdom, settled on her. There was no judgment, only a profound recognition. It did not bow, but simply extended a hand in greeting, and in that gesture, she felt a single, clear thought. A sister has returned home. The Guardian then led her to the central dais, placing a hand upon it. The holographic map of the abyss bloomed into existence, but it was no longer the fragile, flickering web she had first seen. It was a dense, brilliant tapestry of interconnected light, strong and stable, with energy flowing in powerful, harmonious currents. The network had not just healed, it had expanded, its roots reaching deeper and its influence spreading further than ever before. The vision was breathtaking, but it presented her with a terrible choice. The relic in her hand felt warm and quiet. Here, in this sanctum, it would be utterly safe, a part of the whole once more. But out in the world, her people still saw it as their ultimate safeguard, a tool for emergencies. Could she risk leaving them without it? To keep it, however, would be to admit that their partnership was a lie, that they still needed to possess the power to command it. Holding the crystalline orb, she looked from the magnificent, self-sustaining network to the patient, regenerated Guardian. The answer became perfectly clear. She walked to the heart of the Nexus, to the very spot where the Guardian had sacrificed its form, and pressed the relic into a waiting indentation in the living wood. It fused seamlessly with the structure, its light dissolving into the greater glow of the abyss. It was no longer a separate tool, but a permanent, integrated part of the system. This was the final lesson. The technology was not a possession to be wielded, but a relationship to be honored. It was a partner that did not require a leash. As she turned to leave, the entire forest seemed to breathe a deep, contented sigh. The leaves rustled in a gentle chorus, and the light in the cavern pulsed with a warm, affirming rhythm. She knew with absolute certainty that she was not abandoning this power, but entrusting it to the best guardian of all, itself, and she knew the path back would always be open to her. The Academy's walls were woven from living vines, a testament to the principles taught within. Years had woven silver into Elara's hair, but her eyes held the same calm light as she watched a new class of students, children from both the village and Ironhold, practicing resonant frequencies with simple stones. She was no longer a lone botanist, clutching a single desperate hope, but the head of a thriving tradition, a living library of knowledge passed from her hands to dozens of others. Her greatest pride was not the Academy itself, but the proof of its success, the small, specialized relics her most advanced students had since created. One student had crafted a smooth, river-worn stone that could purify tainted water, while another had shaped a wooden flute whose notes encouraged blighted crops to recover. The power was no longer concentrated in one perilous point, but distributed, resilient, and growing. Yet with this growth came a familiar tension. A bright young man named Kale, named for the elder, but brimming with a new kind of ambition, proudly presented his own creation, a complex lattice of crystals designed to accelerate plant growth to an unprecedented rate. He argued it was the next logical step, a tool to end hunger forever, but his sister, Lyra, now a senior instructor, voiced the fear that silenced the room. "Are we not walking the same path as the Artificers?" she asked, her voice tight with memory. They too sought to improve upon nature, to force it to their will. Is this not the same pride that corrupted them? Elara listened to the debate, feeling the weight of ancient history in the air. She did not chastise Kale for his ambition, but she guided him, and all of them, toward a profound humility. No creation born solely of our own intellect can be trusted, she told them gently. We are mere students in a world that has been alive for eons. She established a new, non-negotiable rule. Any new relic, any new piece of symbiotic technology must be submitted to the judgment of the green abyss itself. It must be taken to the Nexus and placed before the Guardian. If the forest accepts it, if it harmonizes with the greater song, then it may be used. If it is rejected, it must be dismantled. This was the ultimate safeguard against the arrogance of creation. The Academy's reputation, built on this careful balance of innovation and reverence, began to ripple outward. Stories of the healed lands and the new ways traveled on the wind and with traders, reaching distant shores where the soil was salted and the skies were gray. They came as pilgrims, not conquerors, drawn by a rumor of hope. The Academy's influence was spreading, a quiet revolution that was only just beginning. One calm morning, as Elara stood on the Academy's highest balcony, overlooking the sea, a lookout's cry echoed up from the shore. A ship was sighted on the horizon, its sails dyed in unfamiliar, vibrant colors, and its flag bearing a symbol none could decipher. Elara felt a familiar, quiet pulse from the forest at her back, a reminder that her work of guardianship was far from over, and its greatest challenges still lay across the water. The air in the great clearing was thick with a shared breath, a stillness that felt heavier than any stone. Elara stood before the entire assembly, the faces of her village, the people of Ironhold, and every student of the Academy turned toward her. In her hands, she cradled the primary relic, its warm, familiar pulse a final, quiet rhythm against her skin. She had carried it from the deepest dark of the abyss to the heart of their new world, and now she understood its final purpose. It was never meant to be a tool, but a teacher, and its last lesson was the most important one of all. To hold it was to hold the temptation of control, a single point of failure for all they had built. Her voice, when it came, was calm and clear, carrying to the very edges of the crowd. This power was never ours to keep, she said. It was only ours to borrow, to learn from, and now to return. With a movement that was both gentle and absolute, she raised the crystal high, and then brought it down sharply onto a waiting, unworked stone at her feet. The sound was not a crash of shattering glass, but a chime of pure, resonant release. The relic exploded into a million motes of emerald light, a swirling constellation of knowledge and energy that hung in the air for a single, breathtaking moment. Then, as if answering a call only it could hear, the cloud of light descended, settling into the soil, the roots of the surrounding trees, the very air itself. The ground beneath their feet warmed, and a wave of vibrant, living green radiated outward from the point of impact, not in a violent surge, but as a deep, contented sigh. The stored memories of the Guardian, the ancient songs of the architects, the entire history of the symbiotic technology were now a permanent part of the world, woven into the fabric of life, where no one could ever lock it away or turn it to a selfish purpose. It was the ultimate act of trust, a faith that the wisdom was now safe within the ecosystem itself, waiting for any with the patience and humility to listen. Elara's journey was complete. She had begun as a seeker of a single answer, became a guardian of a profound secret, and now, in this final, silent offering, she became a true steward. Her legacy cemented not in an object of power, but in the unbreakable principle of harmony. The forest around them seemed to lean in, the leaves whispering a soft, eternal gratitude for a gift finally come home. The gardens around Elara's simple home were a living library of her life's work. She sat in the dappled shade of a tree she had coaxed from a sapling decades ago, its branches now heavy with fruit and memory. From this quiet vantage point, she watched the cycle of knowledge turn. Her first students, like Lyra and Corin, were now the elders, their own hair touched with silver as they guided a new generation of children. These young ones, born of both Forest Village and Ironhold stock, moved through the lush greenery with an innate understanding, their hands testing the resonance of the soil as naturally as breathing. The old borders were gone, not just on maps, but in the very spirit of the people. The community thrived as a single, vibrant tapestry, its patterns enriched by the enduring song of the abyss. The lost technology was no longer a secret to be unearthed or a power to be guarded. It was lived. It was in the way a farmer hummed to a struggling seedling, in the way a builder consulted the land before laying a foundation, in the way every child learned that true strength lies in partnership, not force. New challenges would always come, of course. A strange blight on a distant crop, a debate over the ethics of a new symbiotic tool, the arrival of another curious ship from across the sea. But the foundation was unshakable. It was a foundation of respect, of listening, of understanding that humanity is a thread in a vast, living fabric, not its master weaver. A deep and quiet satisfaction settled in Elara's heart, as warm and steady as the sunlight on her shoulders. Her work was no longer her own. It was woven into the world, its roots sunk so deep that no storm could ever tear them out. It would endure, growing and adapting, long after she was just another whispered story in the rustling leaves. you.